Dr. Eleanor Vance walked quietly through the long, narrow halls of the research facility. The floors shone under the bright lights and the soft hum of machines filled the air. She carried a small tray with a few jars of food, her eyes constantly scanning the corridor. At the far end of the hall, her daughter Lyra waited. Lyra was not like any ordinary child. She had soft, glowing eyes that looked almost magical, and her skin had a faint shimmer, unlike anything Eleanor had seen before. Eleanor had adopted Lyra when she was only a few months old, after the child had been found alone in a strange crash site far from the city. Lyra had always been a quiet child. She moved slowly, carefully, and never seemed to notice the world the way other children did. Eleanor had spent countless hours teaching her to walk safely, to hold objects without dropping them, and to follow simple instructions. Every day, Eleanor worried about her daughter. She thought Lyra was blind, though doctors could never explain why her eyes seemed so different. Some said it might be a rare condition, but Eleanor knew deep down that Lyra's eyes held a secret. She had only ever seen shadows and vague shapes, never the bright colors of the world. "Good morning, Lyra," Eleanor said softly, kneeling beside the small figure who sat on the floor. Lyra's head tilted slightly, but she did not respond. Eleanor gently touched her daughter's shoulder. "Time for breakfast. Let's see if we can finish it before the morning lessons." Lyra's hands moved carefully as she reached for the food. She took small bites, her movements hesitant, as if she feared touching the wrong things. Eleanor watched her closely, wishing there was a way to make life easier for her daughter. Every day was a challenge, and every day Eleanor felt the weight of responsibility more heavily. In the same facility, Marcus, the janitor, pushed his mop along the hallway. He had been working here quietly for months, cleaning the labs and offices, never drawing attention to himself. Marcus was a careful man, observant in ways that most people were not. He noticed small details, like the faint glow on Lyra's skin or the way she sometimes paused before touching an object. He had seen Eleanor worry countless times, and something inside him told him that Lyra was not as helpless as everyone believed. Marcus stopped outside the room where Lyra and Eleanor were. He watched quietly, pretending to adjust a sign on the wall. Lyra reached for a cup, missed it by a small margin, and then moved her hand again, perfectly in line with the cup this time. Marcus tilted his head. That was strange. If she were truly blind, how had she corrected so quickly? Eleanor smiled gently, unaware of Marcus's presence. "You're getting better, Lyra, that's good." Her daughter did not respond, only moving her hand slowly over the tray. Eleanor picked up a small spoon and guided it toward Lyra's mouth. Lyra accepted it, closing her lips around the food, but her eyes, so luminous and full of mystery, stared straight ahead. Eleanor sighed softly, hoping one day someone could explain why her daughter was this way. After breakfast, Eleanor led Lyra toward a small practice room. It was filled with simple objects, soft balls, colorful blocks, and a few sensory toys meant to help Lyra develop coordination. Eleanor encouraged her daughter to touch, to explore, to listen to the sounds each object made. Lyra moved cautiously, her fingers brushing surfaces lightly, her movements slow but deliberate. Marcus followed silently at a distance. He noticed the subtle differences in how Lyra interacted with the objects compared to other children he had seen. She paused at certain colors, even though Eleanor thought she could not see them. She tilted her head slightly when a bright light passed through the window. Marcus's mind raced. Could it be that Lyra was not blind? If so, why did she act as though she were? For the rest of the morning, Eleanor guided Lyra through small tasks. She encouraged her to stack blocks, to place balls into baskets, and to identify shapes by touch. Lyra followed carefully, sometimes hesitating, sometimes moving with surprising accuracy. Eleanor patted her gently. "You're doing wonderfully, my little one. I am so proud of you." Lyra did not smile fully, but her lips curved slightly. It was a small sign, but to Eleanor it felt like a victory. As the day went on, Marcus continued his quiet observations. He watched how Lyra sometimes tilted her head toward sounds or lights, as if sensing something beyond touch. She seemed aware of movements before anyone else noticed. Marcus decided to be patient, to understand before he acted. He had learned that some truths were delicate, especially with a child like Lyra. By midday, Eleanor prepared for a short break. She carried Lyra to a small garden outside the facility. The sun filtered through tall trees, casting soft light on the ground. Lyra sat on the grass, her hands moving over the blades gently. Eleanor knelt beside her, It's beautiful, isn't it? She asked. Lyra remained quiet, only listening to the rustle of leaves and the distant sound of birds. Eleanor watched her closely, feeling both love and concern. Marcus stayed near the edge of the garden, pretending to sweep fallen leaves. He observed Lyra carefully, noticing the way her head turned slightly toward the sunlight, the way her hands moved toward certain objects before Eleanor even mentioned them. He could not explain it fully yet, but he was certain of one thing. Lyra was hiding something. After a while, Eleanor helped Lyra back inside. They returned to the quiet halls of the facility, passing rows of machines and offices. Eleanor carried Lyra's small bag, thinking about what to do next. She wanted her daughter to have a normal life, but she did not know how to make that happen. She did not yet realize that Marcus had begun to notice the truth, a truth that could change everything for both of them. That evening, after the facility was quiet, Marcus cleaned near Lyra's room. He paused at the door, looking through the small window. Lyra was sitting on the floor, gently moving her hands over a soft toy. She paused, then looked straight ahead for a moment, her eyes reflecting a light that seemed alive. Marcus swallowed, knowing he had discovered something important. The child was not blind, but why did she pretend to be? Marcus walked away quietly, mopping the floor slowly. He needed to think carefully. He could not rush Eleanor or Lyra. The truth had to be revealed gently. For now he would observe, learn, and wait for the right moment. In his heart he felt a growing determination. Lyra deserved to be understood, and Eleanor deserved to know the full truth about her extraordinary daughter. As the night fell and the lights dimmed, the facility was calm. Eleanor tucked Lyra into bed, softly brushing her hair. "Sleep well, my little one," she whispered. Lyra closed her eyes, and for a moment her face seemed peaceful, though a small tension lingered. Marcus stood silently outside, watching, waiting for the moment when the hidden secret of Lyra's eyes would finally be known. The next morning, the facility was alive with quiet activity. Scientists moved quickly between labs, and soft machines hummed in the background. Eleanor prepared breakfast for Lyra, who sat on the floor of the small kitchen corner. The little girl's hands moved slowly over the food, just as they had every morning. But today, Marcus noticed something different. He had arrived early, carrying his mop and cleaning bucket, but he paused at the doorway to observe. Lyra seemed to sense the sunlight before it fully touched the floor. Her head tilted slightly toward the window, and her hands moved almost naturally toward the plate. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Marcus's eyes caught every small detail. Eleanor, unaware of Marcus's watchful gaze, continued her gentle instructions. "Lyra, can you take the cup? Here, carefully." She placed the cup near Lyra's hands. Lyra hesitated for a moment, then moved confidently, catching it without spilling. Eleanor smiled, believing it was progress from lessons, but Marcus knew there was more than learning here. After breakfast, Eleanor led Lyra to the practice room again. The small blocks and toys were arranged on the floor as usual. Lyra began her usual routine, slowly touching each object, her fingers brushing over the surfaces carefully. Marcus lingered just outside the doorway, watching. He noticed that when a bright light passed through the window, Lyra's body reacted instantly before Eleanor even pointed it out. She ducked slightly and tilted her head, almost as if she could see the movement rather than merely sense it. Marcus felt a surge of curiosity. He had suspected for days, but now he was certain. Lyra could see, yet she chose not to show it. Marcus decided to test his theory carefully. He quietly picked up a small ball from a corner of the room and placed it in a spot where Lyra's hands were not yet directed. From his position, he could see her reaction clearly. Lyra paused for a moment, then turned and reached directly for the ball without hesitation. Her fingers wrapped around it easily. Marcus exhaled softly. That was it. She was not blind. For the rest of the morning, Marcus observed discreetly, making small mental notes. Lyra sometimes moved as if she were blind, sometimes as if she were fully aware of everything around her. Her patterns did not make sense to anyone else, but Marcus began to see a pattern forming, a careful, intentional act. She was hiding her vision, pretending to be blind. Eleanor continued her lessons, unaware that her daughter's reality was different from what she believed. "Lyra, can you stack the blocks?" she asked. Lyra picked up a block and hesitated. Eleanor guided her hand gently. Lyra followed, stacking them carefully. but every now and then she glanced toward the window or the door as if noticing something beyond touch. Eleanor smiled, proud of her daughter's determination. Marcus stayed at the edge of the room pretending to sweep fallen papers and dust. He noticed Lyra's subtle glances, the slight pauses in her movements, the careful tilts of her head. It all pointed to the same truth. Lyra was not blind. But why would a child hide something so important? Marcus felt a gentle resolve in his chest. He had to find out, and he had to do it gently. At lunch, Eleanor and Lyra sat together in the small dining area. Lyra's movements were careful as always, her hands brushing over the plate and utensils. Eleanor served her food, speaking softly. "Try the soup, Lyra. Remember, it's okay to make mistakes. I will help you." Lyra nodded slightly, and for a brief moment her lips curved into a tiny smile. Marcus entered quietly to clean the tables. He noticed that Lyra's eyes seemed to follow the sunlight that streamed in through the window. She moved her hands in a way that suggested she was aware of its position. Eleanor, focused on encouraging Lyra, did not notice these details. Marcus's mind raced. He needed to understand why Lyra hid her sight. After lunch, Marcus took a cautious step. He placed a small toy car on the floor, far from where Eleanor was guiding Lyra. Then he stepped back to watch. Lyra paused, then slowly walked toward it, her fingers wrapping around the toy easily. Eleanor turned, surprised. "Oh, you found it. Good job, Lyra," she said, thinking it was luck or a sign of learning. Marcus shook his head slightly. It was no accident. Lyra knew exactly where it was. Marcus knew he had to be careful. He could not rush Eleanor, and he could not frighten Lyra. He decided to watch and wait, quietly observing every small action. He noticed how Lyra sometimes peeked at Eleanor when she was distracted, how she reacted instantly to shadows or movements in the corner of the room. Every small gesture was a clue. By mid-afternoon, Marcus felt certain he understood Lyra's secret. She could see, but she chose not to. He could sense the fear in her movements, the worry that revealing her sight might make her different or cause others to be afraid. Marcus's heart went out to her. He had seen many children struggle, but Lyra's secret was more delicate than anything he had encountered. Eleanor, busy with paperwork and planning the next lesson, did not notice Marcus's growing awareness. She had always relied on routine and structure, believing that careful practice would help Lyra navigate the world. Today, however, Marcus realized that no lesson could help until the truth was known. As the day drew to a close, Eleanor prepared Lyra for bedtime. She helped her change into soft pajamas and guided her to the small bedroom. Lyra sat on the bed quietly, her hands resting on the blanket. Eleanor tucked her in gently, brushing her hair softly. "Sleep well, my little one," she whispered. Lyra closed her eyes, but Marcus noticed a small flicker of her eyelids as if she were still watching the shadows in the room. Marcus stood quietly outside the bedroom, leaning slightly against the wall. He had learned enough today to be certain. Lyra was hiding something, and it was not because of illness or accident. She could see. The question now was why and how he could help Eleanor and Lyra understand this truth without fear. The night was calm, but Marcus's mind was active. He walked slowly down the hallway, mop in hand, thinking of a careful plan. He could not reveal too much too soon. He had to gather more observations, understand Lyra's patterns, and prepare Eleanor gently. The secret of Lyra's eyes was delicate, but Marcus felt ready to take the next step when the moment was right. Outside, the moonlight touched the facility softly. Lyra slept peacefully, though her hands rested gently on her toy, fingers moving slightly as if she were still aware of the world around her. Eleanor sat beside the bed for a few moments, watching her daughter breathe slowly and evenly, unaware of the hidden truth Marcus had discovered. For Marcus, this was the beginning. He had found the first pieces of the puzzle, and he knew that soon everything would change, for Lyra, for Eleanor, and for himself. The journey to understanding had only just begun. The next morning, the facility felt unusually quiet. The machines hummed softly, but there was a calmness in the air that Marcus found strange. He carried his cleaning supplies, but his attention was fixed on Lyra. He had spent days observing her, noting her subtle movements and small gestures, and the truth was clear. She could see. But why? Why had she never told anyone? Eleanor entered the room where Lyra played with a set of soft shapes. "Good morning, Lyra," she said gently. Let's start today with something fun. Can you find the triangle? Lyra's small hands moved carefully over the shapes. She paused, then reached confidently for the triangle without hesitation. Eleanor smiled, thinking her daughter was learning quickly. Marcus, watching from the doorway, noticed Lyra's eyes flick toward the light streaming through the window. Her head tilted just slightly, as if she were aware of the sunlight even while focusing on the shapes. Marcus quietly set his mop aside and moved closer, though he stayed in the shadows. He wanted to see more. He watched how Lyra handled each shape, noticing small hesitations and sudden movements that seemed intentional. It was as if she was pretending to be blind at times, and then revealing her sight in subtle ways when no one was watching. After a while, Eleanor stepped out for a brief meeting with other staff. She left Lyra alone in the room, trusting that Marcus would keep an eye on her. Lyra sat quietly on the floor, the shapes spread before her. She paused, tilting her head toward a faint shadow in the corner. Marcus stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "You know," he said softly, "I think you can see." Lyra froze, her small hands hovering over the shapes. She did not look at him directly, but did not move away either. Marcus knelt at her level, keeping his voice calm. "It's okay. You don't have to hide from me." Lyra's hands trembled slightly. She had never spoken about her sight, never revealed it to anyone. Her mother believed she was blind, and the other staff treated her carefully, gently but cautiously. Marcus's words were new and unexpected. Slowly, Lyra reached out and touched his hand. Her skin was soft and her fingers were small and delicate. I didn't want anyone to be scared," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus smiled gently. "I'm not scared, Lyra, I just want to understand. You can trust me." For several minutes, Lyra stayed quiet, her fingers entwined with his. Marcus noticed the fear in her eyes, the worry that someone would not accept her for who she was. He nodded slowly. "It's okay. You don't have to hide anymore. Not from me." When Eleanor returned, she found Lyra sitting quietly on the floor, Marcus beside her. Lyra's hands rested gently on the shapes and her eyes looked almost hopeful. Eleanor noticed something different in her daughter's posture. There was a small confidence she had not seen before. "Lyra, what are you doing?" Eleanor asked softly, kneeling beside them. Lyra hesitated. Marcus gave her a gentle nod, encouraging her to speak. I can see," Lyra admitted, her voice trembling. "I've always been able to. I was scared that people would be afraid of me." Eleanor's eyes widened and she reached out to hold her daughter. "Oh, Lyra," Eleanor whispered, pulling her close. Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lyra hugged her tightly, resting her head on Eleanor's shoulder. "I didn't want anyone to be scared. Not you, not anyone." Marcus stood quietly, watching the emotional reunion. He had helped uncover the truth, but he did not want to interrupt their moment. He had learned that patience and observation were sometimes more powerful than action. Lyra had chosen the moment herself, and now, the first step toward honesty had been taken. Over the next few days, Eleanor and Marcus worked carefully with Lyra. They encouraged her to explore her vision slowly, helping her understand that being different was not something to hide. Lyra was cautious at first, moving gently through the halls and touching objects while also using her eyes to guide herself. Marcus noticed small improvements each day. Lyra began to react naturally to light and movement, sometimes even smiling when she recognized colors or shapes. Eleanor watched with wonder, amazed at her daughter's resilience and courage. The bond between mother and daughter grew stronger, filled with love and understanding. One afternoon, Marcus set up a small game to help Lyra practice her sight. He placed soft toys at different distances and asked her to find them. At first, Lyra hesitated, unsure if she should trust her vision. Then slowly she reached for each toy, her hands moving confidently toward them. Marcus smiled. She was learning to embrace her gift, her confidence growing with each small success. Eleanor entered the room, watching Lyra play. "You're amazing, Lyra," she said softly. "I am so proud of you." Lyra looked up, her luminous eyes shining, and smiled. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered. That evening, after the facility had quieted down, Marcus found himself outside Lyra's room again. He paused, reflecting on what had changed. Lyra was no longer hiding, at least not completely. She had taken the first step toward trusting others with her truth. Marcus felt a gentle pride. He had only observed, only guided quietly, but the impact was clear. Lyra was beginning to embrace who she really was. As the lights dimmed and the night grew still, Eleanor tucked Lyra into bed.
"Sleep well, my little one," she whispered, brushing her hair softly.
Lyra's eyes reflected a soft glow, no longer fearful but calm and trusting. Marcus left the room quietly, satisfied that the first stage of understanding had been achieved. He knew there was still a journey ahead. Lyra would need to practice fully trusting her sight, and Eleanor would need to learn how to help her navigate a world that was not always kind to differences. But for now, a delicate balance had been reached. Truth once hidden was beginning to shine, and the first steps toward acceptance and growth had been taken. Outside, the moonlight touched the facility, casting long shadows on the walls. Marcus walked slowly down the hallway, mop in hand, but his thoughts were with Lyra and Eleanor. He had seen something extraordinary, an alien child hiding her sight, discovering courage and slowly learning to trust. And he knew that the days ahead would be filled with hope, understanding, and the quiet magic of discovery. The morning sun streamed softly through the windows of the facility, casting warm light over the practice room. Lyra sat on the floor, her small hands brushing over the familiar blocks and soft toys. Today was different. There was a quiet confidence in her movements, a sense of purpose that had not been there before. Eleanor watched her daughter closely, a gentle smile on her face. "You're ready for something new, Lyra," Eleanor said softly. "Let's try exploring a little more today." Lyra's luminous eyes reflected the sunlight, and she nodded slightly. Her lips curved into a small, hopeful smile. For the first time in many months, Eleanor felt that her daughter was truly ready to embrace her sight. Marcus, quietly observing from the doorway, noticed Lyra's careful yet confident gestures. She seemed aware of every shadow, every ray of light, every tiny movement around her. Marcus had spent weeks watching, learning, and waiting. Now he could see the change, the first real sign that Lyra was ready to face the world as she truly was. Eleanor guided Lyra toward the center of the room. "I have something special for you," she said, pointing to a small basket filled with brightly colored objects. "Can you find the red ball?" Lyra's hands moved slowly at first, then with purpose. She picked up the ball immediately, her eyes shining with delight. "That's perfect," Eleanor exclaimed, her voice full of pride. "You see it? You really see it?" Lyra looked up at her mother, a mixture of joy and relief on her face. For years she had hidden her sight, afraid that revealing it would make her different, make others afraid, or worse, make her mother disappointed. But now, Eleanor's smile told her that everything would be okay. Marcus stepped closer, holding a small tray with new objects. "Let's try something else, Lyra," he said gently. "I want to see how well you can use your eyes to guide your hands." Lyra's eyes lit up. She was excited, but also cautious. She remembered the fear of being judged, but Marcus's calm presence reassured her. The exercise began. Lyra moved carefully, picking up objects of different shapes and sizes. Sometimes she paused, tilting her head as if calculating the distance or noticing shadows. Marcus watched every movement, amazed at her skill. She had always been careful, but now there was a new confidence, a trust in her own abilities. Eleanor knelt beside Lyra. "You're amazing," she whispered. "I never knew how strong and brave you were." Lyra's hands moved smoothly over the objects, and she laughed softly. It was a light, joyful sound that filled the room. Eleanor felt tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief and pride. Her daughter was learning to trust herself, and in doing so, she was learning to trust the world around her. After the practice session, Eleanor suggested a walk in the small garden outside the facility. Lyra held Eleanor's hand lightly as they stepped into the sunlight. The grass felt soft under her feet, and the leaves of the trees shimmered in the breeze. Lyra paused, looking around, taking in the colors and shapes for the first time without fear. Marcus followed at a respectful distance, sweeping the paths quietly. He noticed how Lyra's steps were more confident than before. She reached out to touch a flower, then looked closely at its petals, her eyes wide with wonder. It was as if the world had opened to her suddenly, and every detail was new and exciting. Eleanor watched her daughter explore. "You see everything, don't you, Lyra?" she asked softly. Lyra nodded, smiling. "Yes, Mama, I was scared before, but I know I can trust you now." Eleanor hugged her gently, feeling a warmth she had never experienced before. For months she had worried, tried to help, and sometimes felt helpless. Now she understood that Lyra's courage was her greatest strength. As the day went on, Marcus quietly introduced small challenges. He placed soft obstacles along the garden path, encouraging Lyra to navigate them using her sight. She moved carefully at first, then with increasing confidence. Eleanor cheered her on, praising every small success. Lyra laughed, feeling proud of herself in a way she had never done before. By afternoon, Lyra's progress was clear. She could see, she could trust her eyes, and she was learning to move freely without fear. Marcus watched silently, satisfied that his careful observations and patience had made a difference. Lyra had revealed her secret in her own time, and now she was beginning to embrace it fully. Eleanor decided it was time for a special reward. She brought out a small sketchbook and colored pencils. "I thought you might like to try drawing," she said. Lyra's eyes lit up. She had never used her sight this way before, and the idea excited her. She picked up a pencil and began to draw the shapes and colors she saw in the garden. Her lines were soft, delicate, and precise. Eleanor watched in amazement as her daughter recreated the world on paper. Marcus smiled quietly from the doorway. Lyra was not just learning to see. She was learning to express herself. Her confidence, her courage, and her curiosity were blooming together. Eleanor, too, was learning, realizing that trust and patience were as important as teaching. As the sun began to set, Eleanor and Lyra returned inside. They sat together near the window, looking at the colors of the sky as it turned pink and gold. Lyra rested her head on Eleanor's shoulder, feeling safe and loved. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered, "for letting me see the world." Eleanor hugged her tightly. "Thank you for trusting me, Lyra. I am so proud of you." Later that evening, Marcus walked through the quiet halls, mop in hand, reflecting on the day. He had watched a child discover her strength, her courage, and her vision. He had helped quietly and gently, but the real change had come from Lyra herself. She had faced her fear, embraced her truth, and taken the first steps toward a life full of possibility. Outside, the moonlight shone softly on the facility. Lyra slept peacefully in her bed, her small hands resting on her sketchbook. Eleanor sat beside her, watching over her daughter with love and pride. Marcus paused for a moment, looking at the room, then continued down the hallway. The journey was not over, but the most important step had been taken. Lyra had begun to live fully, to trust herself in the world around her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new discoveries. But for tonight there was peace. The hidden fear was gone, replaced by trust, courage, and the gentle glow of understanding. And for Marcus, Eleanor, and Lyra, the future looked brighter than ever before. The morning sun bathed the facility in a soft golden light. Today was special. Lyra woke with a sense of excitement she had never felt before. Her luminous eyes reflected the sunlight, and for the first time, she felt ready to face the world fully without fear. Eleanor noticed the sparkle in her daughter's gaze and smiled, knowing that months of patience, love, and gentle guidance had brought them to this moment. "Good morning,
Lyra," Eleanor said softly, brushing her daughter's hair.
"Are you ready for a new day?" Lyra nodded eagerly. "Yes, Mama. I want to see everything today." Eleanor's heart swelled with pride. She had always believed in her daughter, but seeing Lyra embrace her sight so fully was more than she had ever hoped for. Marcus, quietly passing through the hallway, noticed the warmth between mother and daughter. He carried his cleaning supplies but took a moment to pause at the doorway. Lyra's confidence was clear. She moved with purpose, her hands guided by her eyes, her steps steady and assured. Marcus felt a quiet satisfaction. He had only watched and gently supported, but the real transformation had come from Lyra herself. Eleanor led Lyra to the practice room, now filled with new objects designed to encourage exploration. Brightly colored shapes, soft toys, and small puzzles were arranged across the floor. "Let's try something new today," Eleanor said. "Can you find the green star and the yellow circle?" Lyra's eyes scanned the room carefully. Without hesitation, she picked up the objects, her hands guided effortlessly by her sight. Eleanor clapped softly, beaming with pride. "Perfect," she exclaimed.
"You see everything so clearly now."
"I am so proud of you." Lyra smiled, a genuine, bright smile that reached her eyes. For years she had hidden her vision, afraid of being different, afraid of judgment. Now she was free to explore, to learn, and to enjoy the world around her. Marcus stepped closer, carrying a small tray of new items. Let's try something more challenging, he said gently. You can use your sight to guide your hands and your mind. Lyra's eyes lit up with curiosity. She began picking up objects of different sizes and textures, arranging them carefully, and even noticing subtle shadows that hinted at their positions. Marcus watched quietly, amazed at her skill. Eleanor knelt beside Lyra. You are amazing, Lyra, she said softly. I never imagined how brave and smart you really are. Lyra blushed slightly but continued her work. Her confidence was growing with every small success, and the bond between mother and daughter deepened with every shared moment. After their practice session, Eleanor suggested a walk in the garden. The sunlight streamed through the trees, casting dancing shadows on the grass. Lyra's steps were careful but confident. She reached out to touch flowers, observing the colors and textures. Marcus followed quietly, noticing how she moved naturally, guided by her newly embraced vision. Eleanor spoke softly as they walked. Lyra, you are no longer hiding. You can trust your eyes, your instincts, and yourself. Lyra looked up, her eyes bright. I trust you, Mama. I trust you and Marcus too, she said, glancing toward him. Marcus smiled gently, feeling honored by her trust. He had been a quiet observer for weeks, but now he was a part of her journey in a meaningful way. Throughout the day, Lyra explored more confidently. She climbed small steps, reached for objects on shelves, and even tried simple puzzles without guidance. Eleanor cheered her on at every step, while Marcus offered small encouragements and careful observations from the background. Lyra's confidence grew with each success, and she began to smile more freely, laugh more easily, and even speak with greater clarity. As afternoon approached, Eleanor brought out Lyra's sketchbook and colored pencils. I thought you could draw what you see, she said. Lyra's eyes sparkled as she picked up a pencil. She began to sketch the garden, capturing the trees, the flowers, and the sunlight on the grass. Each line and color reflected her newfound confidence and joy. Eleanor watched in amazement, seeing the world through her daughter's eyes for the first time. Marcus quietly stepped back, observing the scene. Lyra was no longer hiding her sight, no longer hesitant or afraid. She was embracing her abilities, exploring her world, and expressing herself fully. Marcus felt a sense of quiet pride. His patience, careful observation, and gentle guidance had helped, but the real courage belonged to Lyra. As evening fell, Eleanor suggested one last activity for the day. They sat together near the window, watching the sky turn shades of pink, orange, and gold. Look at the colors, Lyra, Eleanor said softly. They are beautiful, just like you. Lyra rested her head on her mother's shoulder, taking in the sky. I never knew the world could be so bright, she whispered. Thank you, Mama, for helping me see it. Eleanor hugged her daughter tightly. Thank you for trusting me, Lyra. You are brave and you are wonderful. Never forget that. Marcus watched silently from the doorway, feeling a sense of fulfillment. He had witnessed something extraordinary. A child discovering her true self, and a mother discovering the depth of her daughter's courage. Later that night, the facility grew quiet. Lyra slept peacefully, her sketchbook and colored pencils resting beside her bed. Eleanor sat nearby, watching over her daughter with love and pride. Marcus quietly walked down the hallway, mop in hand, reflecting on the journey they had shared. He had observed, guided, and supported, but the transformation belonged entirely to Lyra. The days that followed were filled with new adventures. Lyra continued to explore her world, using her sight confidently. Eleanor and Marcus supported her, offering guidance when needed but allowing her to make her own discoveries. Lyra learned to trust herself, embrace her differences, and find joy in her unique abilities. Over time, the bond between the three grew stronger. Eleanor, who had once worried constantly about her daughter's future, now saw Lyra's courage and independence. Marcus, who had quietly observed from the background, became a trusted friend and mentor. And Lyra, who had hidden her sight for so long, finally embraced it fully, discovering the beauty, wonder, and freedom that had always been within her reach. One evening, as the sun set and the facility was bathed in a soft glow, Eleanor, Lyra, and Marcus sat together in the garden. Lyra looked up at the sky, her eyes shining. I can see everything now, she said softly. The world is beautiful and I'm not afraid anymore. Eleanor hugged her daughter tightly. Marcus smiled quietly, feeling a sense of quiet joy. For the first time in many years, all three felt a sense of peace. The hidden fear was gone, replaced by trust, courage, and understanding. Lyra had discovered her true self. Eleanor had discovered the depth of her daughter's strength. And Marcus had discovered the quiet power of patience, observation, and gentle guidance. The night grew still, and the stars shone brightly in the sky. Lyra, Eleanor, and Marcus knew that the journey of discovery was ongoing, but for tonight there was only peace, love, and hope. The child who had once hidden her sight now embraced the world fully, and those who loved her shared in the quiet wonder of her courage. And so in the calm of the night, the facility stood as a quiet witness to a remarkable journey, a journey of trust, discovery, and the gentle magic that happens when love and patience guide the way. Lyra had seen the world for the first time with her own eyes, and in doing so she had shown everyone around her the true meaning of courage, hope, and unconditional love.